Alderman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Ornowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Muhammad.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Present, and Alderman Howard is.
Alderwoman Howard.
Present.
7 present, you have quorum.
Okay, should make it if you want to go up there. We're gonna, well, first off, I guess we gotta ask for approval of the prior minutes to the public safety meeting.
I move for approval of the minutes from June 5th, 2019. Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Ornowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard.
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Aye.
7 aye votes.
Okay, so it's okay that people are signing up for that. We're going to deal with Board Bill number 62, introduced by Alderwoman Hubbard, Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman, go ahead and just explain what your bill does.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. I am here on behalf of Board Bill 62. It is a grant agreement between the fire department and a company, a grant to have smoke detectors that they will be placing into our citizens, our residents' homes. And I would ask for your favorable consideration on this bill, Board Bill 62, and I have myself and Chief Jenkinson here if you have any questions.
Okay, members of the committee, Vice Chairman Boyd, any questions?
Sure. Chief, this is what year for this grant now? We've been doing this. How many years now?
We've been doing this since 1985. There was 2 cities that got in this original federal grant, us and the Fire Department of Atlanta, Georgia.
When do you plan on rolling out this program for this year?
We never stop rolling out this program. This is a continuation of our smoke detector and CO detector program. So we do smoke detector installations year-round. I believe last year we installed just over 4,000 smoke detectors in the city of St. Louis, and for about the 12th year in a row, we've had one of the lowest fire death incident rates in the entire country.
Yeah, I know it seems like every year there's kind of like some press on you guys going out in the neighborhood doing. I know you guys do an excellent job at ensuring the safety of our residents with the smoke detectors. I was just kind of curious, all the firehouses get about the same amount, and how do people access it without you guys just publicizing you'll be out in a particular neighborhood?
Okay, we do blitzes. We go out in the neighborhoods, knock on doors. It's also available online, if you will. You can go to our website. You can ask, come down to headquarters. You can walk into any firehouse. The only stipulation that we have with these smoke detectors is we have to install them because we track every address and every one we put in.
Okay. So let me ask you this. If we want to give like 5 away at a ward meeting as like door prizes, could we take the names of people and then just contact you and you'll contact them and go out and install them?
Correct. We have a form that we can provide you. They can sign up. We'll get it back at headquarters and we'll provide it to the battalion chiefs who distribute it to the firehouses, and they'll go out and install them anytime. If they need it installed at 2 o'clock in the morning, we'll be out there.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard.
No question.
Alderwoman Howard.
I just want to commend you. This is a wonderful service. I've taken advantage of it myself since I'm a single woman.
Good.
And, you know, the firefighters are very courteous, and they put them in the place they need to be, and everything's taken care of. It gives me a sense of security, and I advocate for anybody that, you know, doesn't have the ability to install them, or if you just feel better having them. I think it's a good thing to have.
Appreciate your comments.
Thank you so much.
Alderman Muhammad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a match with this particular grant?
Yes, there is.
What's that number?
The match on this amount, the total amount of grant is $73,524. The match is $3,676.
Does that come out of general revenue, or is that the fire department's independent budget?
That match will come out of a donation account, the St. Louis Fire Department Foundation.
Nice. Awesome. Great bill, Alderwoman. Thank you, Commissioner.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
I just wanted to compliment you, even though they said I had too many smoke detectors in my house, so it's okay though. But I do have a lot of seniors that love the program, and we thought it was just when they changed the batteries, but we found out it's continuous, so that even works better, so thank you. It's a good program.
Thank you.
So I'm not going to ask Clark Hubbard because she's a sponsor, but Jeffrey had asked if they do 5, can they just bring the sheets to the meeting? Maybe there's 8 or 10 or 12 people that want to sign up. Is there a limit if they bring the sheets to a ward meeting? Are you trying to limit it to like 5 or 10?
No, we don't. No, we try not to limit. If you need the smoke detectors, we're going to get them and install them. Doesn't matter.
So they can bring them. So, okay, that was my only question. I guess it'd be good if we all bring them to our ward meetings for people that might need them. So I'll entertain a motion to pass Board Bill.
I make a motion to pass Board Bill number 62 with a do pass recommendation.
Previous roll.
Previous roll. Hearing no objection to previous roll, Board Bill 62 passes out with a do pass recommendation. And you're done.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to start with Chief Hayden and Jimmy Edwards. I'm going to let you guys go ahead and make a statement, and then we'll kind of move from there, because I know you guys have a 2 o'clock meeting, so when they're done, they may not stay, but, you know, and if any press has questions for them, I would say grab them in the hall, because they again, they may not be able to stay. At least up until 2, we'll keep them here. So, the question, I guess, is, of course, you know, it's about the Facebook questions. I will say that this represents very few officers when you're talking about 1,000 plus officers.
So less than 2%.
Okay, so less than 2%. And so I'm sure we're going to hear pro and con. Well, let's see. I don't know what the pro or con's about here, because it's just hearing what the public has to say. And everybody wrote on the pro side, so I don't know what that means. So it does represent, and I know that you guys have enacted policies. I read it in the Post. Is that policy that that's going to go out to all city employees, my understanding? Is that something that's been enacted for a while, or is that something relatively new?
Mr. Alderman, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jimmy Edwards. I am the Director of Public Safety for the City of St. Louis. With respect to the post, let me just say very precisely, succinctly, and as clear as possible, those posts were racist, they were homophobic, they were abhorrent. And we have serious problems with respect to those types of things being said or being posted, irrespective of one's First Amendment rights. If you work for the St. Louis Police Department, then your First Amendment rights will and shall have limitations. With respect to the posts that you are talking about, those posts occurred in 2015, 2016, and 2017, prior to any social media policy in the city of St. Louis. The city of St. Louis had never had a social media policy that would have prohibited private posting while you were not on duty but at home. So let me make that perfectly clear. The first attempt to make a social media policy came to my attention, and the reason that we have a social media policy, it was brought to my attention by many back in December of 2017. In 2017, I learned of a very anti-Islamic post as it relates to one of our officers. That information was shared with law enforcement, both state as well as federal. Immediately thereafter, I started the process of trying to implement a social media policy. So within 90 days, we were floating discussions with respect to a social media policy. The first attempt to launch a social media policy occurred in June of 2018. There was a lot of opposition by some of the folk that are in this room, some of the general public. They were concerned that the social media policy was too expansive. I was interested in implementing a policy that was retroactive, that would have given me an opportunity to go and look at social media policy 5 years previous to the date of implementation. The compromise was to implement the policy prospectively, starting from September 1st and moving forward. Since that policy has been in place, several people have been disciplined under our social media policy. I have terminated 2 and have suspended others. I've terminated both African American and white individuals under the policy. With respect to the post that we're here about, we had approximately 44 officers that were identified. 22 officers are still employed by the St. Louis Police Department. We added on another officer, so we're up to 23 with respect to those posts. Those posts were made by both men and women, both white and African American. And so those posts are unfortunately, lots of folk are involved with respect to the posts. We looked at the most egregious posts. The most egregious posts were done by members of the St. Louis Police Department with in excess of 25 years on the force, which is very, very troubling for me. Those 3 folk have been placed on administrative duty. There is a process, and I understand the process. And I can tell you that I also understand that perhaps those folks had or have already been disciplined either in 2015, 2016, and 2017. And so, of course, we're conducting IED investigations to try to determine the extent of that discipline. Because I suspect that there will be some situations and circumstances that I will be constrained by the law. So what I've tried to do is just give you an overview without delving too deeply into personnel matters that we cannot delve into.
No, I understand, and we can't ask names, but it sounded like you said roughly 3 that were the most egregious out of the 20-something, or? Okay. And so I guess I'll ask Vice Chairman, do you think we should go down and ask questions or wait till the chief speaks? What do you think's the best? We'll wait for the chief. Okay, so just, Chief, if you want to go ahead and just give us an overview. And I don't think there's anybody in this group who's blaming you or, we appreciate you guys coming out on what's really short notice. I mean, we called this morning and said, hey, or I guess Friday, but just said we're having this meeting, and I do appreciate you coming. And I don't think there's anybody on this group that doesn't feel that, but I think the part of this is, one, to explain this is not the majority of the police officers. It's a very small group, and that things are being done and within the limits of the law. But please, Chief, if you'd go ahead.
Sure. So the judge mentioned, of course, I too am very deeply concerned about the post. I think that anybody that read them would have a lot of concern about them. Again, the judge mentioned that one of our first moves was to the officers that posted the most egregious posts that really made us concerned about whether or not there are the potential for their interaction with the public could be viewed as targeted or that type of thing. And so those officers were immediately placed on desk duty, and then we'll parse through the rest of them. I know that the judge mentioned that there were at least 22 persons that are involved. That can be I would ask for your patience. I mean, that can be an extensive process. We're looking at not only the names, but we're looking at the dates these postings were. We're looking at other potential charges that the officers could be charged with. So he mentioned a process, but it'll be an extensive process. It'll be a very competent process, and hopefully at the end result that a lot of people's expectations will be met.
Okay, thank you. Public Safety Director, did you want to, Personnel, would you like to come up and talk? And just give us a quick overview of if we're making policy change, if we're making that policy change for all employees, whether they're police or fire or aldermen or whatever we do.
Thank you to the honorable members of the board here for allowing me to address this really important issue. I'll tell you first what we currently do and have been doing, and then a little bit very briefly about what we intend to do. Already, every single civil service employee, and we have 6,700 civil service positions, go through a new employee orientation, which is a full day. And our training and organizational development manager at that time covers two of our policies, which I brought copies today. One is Administrative Regulation 103, which is the EEO complaint policy and complaint procedure, and we cover that thoroughly. For the board's information, each of the departments have diversity counselors, where someone can go in confidence without going to their manager or going to their appointing authority and discuss concerns or share complaints if they feel that there's been a violation. Additionally, they can go to their appointing authority directly and ask for assistance, or perhaps most importantly, they can go to the employee relations section of the Department of Personnel and talk to somebody. We take walk-ins, we have a large caseload, and we do a thorough investigation with findings of fact and then also recommendations for the appointing authority to take action if necessary. And that has been in existence for quite some time. Additionally, we have a mandatory 3-year refresher course for all employees, and we do leave that currently to the appointing authorities to enforce. What I am doing now, though, is a little bit different with Judge Edwards and working with the law department. They came up with a social media policy issued in September of 2018, and it very clearly defines exactly what employees may do and what they cannot do. And this is very important. So we have every employee at the time that they're brought on board read and sign for that policy. We also are incorporating that into our EEOC and harassment courses. 103 is again the complaint procedure with EEOC, and then we take harassment very seriously, whether it's sexual harassment or whether it's harassment based on Title VII or any reason. I can tell you that one of the things that I was asked by reporters before was, did the city see a large increase with the Me Too movement? We did not. But one of the reasons we didn't see an increase in complaints is because we already had a very, very low zero tolerance against that kind of behavior. So the appointing authorities, after receiving our full investigation, frequently took action in terms of dismissing the employee or taking very serious discipline. One of the new things that we will be doing is issuing, it's on my desk now for review, a new employee training and development policy. And what that does is that's going to require refresher training on an annual basis. I've spoken to the law department with Judge Edwards about this. Every single employee will have to take training on EEOC, on harassment, also on social media, and we're going to be rolling out the first of that training at the request of Jimmy Edwards and the commissioner with the police department. So we'll be training 60 to 70 police sergeants next week. No, not next week, this week. And thereafter, we will be going through and providing this 2-hour training for all police officers of all different ranks. We will also then be asking everyone to provide proof on their service rating. When their annual rating comes due, they're going to have to submit proof that they have taken this mandatory training, or otherwise they'll be subject to discipline up to including dismissal from their appointing authority. And I will give the committee just this information. The police department currently does have a policy also where members take a required amount of training annually on harassment on both Admin Reg 103 and 113, and also they, through their own system, log in and document that training. So that's just an overview of what we currently do. We do very thorough investigations, and it's a confidential process to the extent possible. I've got the policies here along with the code of conduct, which also talks about how we interact with each other, and employees receive this and have to sign for this on an annual basis as well. So I've got copies here for the honorable members of the board and for anyone else who would like a copy.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I just amplify just a little bit? Let me just say that if you're shocked to see this type of behavior in the city of St. Louis, then we are being naive. It's been in our face, we understand it, and we have to fix it. I know that a sensitivity problem or policy or implementation, whatever we want to call it, is not enough. We have to address this matter in terms of controlling people's behaviors. I can't change your attitude, I can't change your heart, but I can certainly change your behavior. So our intent is to try to address it, whether we call it anti-bias training, anti-racism training, anti-homophobic training, whatever we call it. I have to change the culture, and the culture has to change. So we're committed to doing it. We've come a long way with respect to this matter. So this isn't something that none of us are shocked about. It's certainly not something that we are happy about. So I just want to make it perfectly clear that these matters will be addressed.
And I don't disagree. I've heard from police officers that have called me and said, look, these guys don't represent us. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to speak louder. No, I've even heard from police officers that say, look, this is embarrassing, it does not represent us. And that's why I said in my statement that this is less than 2% of the police officers. And I think it's a good idea to do the training. I think the Board of Aldermen, we did this a few years back, and maybe we need to renew it ourselves. But anyway, I think what I'm going to do is go down the line here. Vice Chairman Jeffrey Boyd, would you have questions of any of the three?
Sure, thank you. Judge Edwards, I have one question for you. Do you think that this behavior or your investigation into this particular issue will hinder prosecution with the Circuit Attorney's Office?
Well, I think only the Circuit Attorney can answer that question, but professionally, I certainly think it begs a question with respect to ethics, and certainly is something that she will have to evaluate herself.
Okay. Richard Frank, if you don't mind, a couple questions for you.
Yes, sir.
If this occurred prior to an actual policy being adopted by the City of St. Louis, what real recourse is there as far as disciplinary action?
Prior to the current policy, as the judge alluded, we had a first draft of a social policy, and that was back in June of 2018. But even before that, if there were instances that occurred on the workplace, we could deal with it. As government employees, we all are protected by constitutional rights that the public sector doesn't, or private sector does not have. So these people are protected by, all of our civil service people are protected by the First Amendment freedom of speech. However, there's been several court cases that have said that's true. However, you cannot make statements or conduct behaviors that are disruptive to the workplace, and that's been up through the New York State Supreme Court and other higher level courts. So we knew that we could take action and did take action when there was inappropriate language, inappropriate behavior. You know, I can say that I've signed off on dismissals, lengthy suspensions, et cetera, over my 15 years here. But what's changed is that in highly regulated areas, the courts, really haven't opined too much yet about what you can do for off-duty types of behaviors. Again, highly regulated areas would be like the police division, fire division, railroads are classic cases, but now we see this proliferation of Facebook. One of the things you may or may not know about Facebook, which I just learned, is that there's an algorithm. So you may only see posts from your 25 closest friends, and there may be a lot out there that you're not even seeing. So we're really kind of uncovering through this report and through other different, I don't say whistleblowing, but really people alerting us to these problems. And these are issues that may not have anything to do directly with the workplace, but as city employees, we have an ethical standard to treat each other in a certain way. And so I think the city has positioned itself saying that now, even if it didn't happen at work, this behavior is so onerous that, you're bringing prejudice to the service, and there's a way to address it through our policies.
Not sure if I heard So if this happened in 2015, 2016, could disciplinary action take place if it was prior to the policy actually being implemented?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, Alderman Boyd. So if this had happened, I think you said 2016, so the rule that would apply would be our Rule 7. and that's 7.004B of the police manual, which simply states that department members shall conduct themselves in a way that they will not bring discredit to the department. That would be the rule that would apply.
Gotcha.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you. Mr. Frank,
Unbecoming.
back again. Will this policy that we have in place for quote-unquote city employees, civil service employees, apply to appointed officials or employees?
It would not apply to anyone outside of the civil service system. Again, we have 6,700 full-time positions and about 500 per performance and part-time positions. It will apply to all of them, but we don't have any authority. The Department of Personnel doesn't have any authority to promulgate regulations, for the county offices or for any elected official. So that would be incumbent upon each of them, such as the Board of Aldermen or other offices, to adopt similar types of policies or to regulate those own behaviors.
I'm sure I'm going to use the mayor, for example, and I would think whoever the mayor is would police the policy, but it would not apply to someone appointed by the mayor.
No, and I think, again, that's probably one of the reasons that there's the Ethics Commission where reported violations, can go about different types of conduct.
What ethics commission?
Let me see if I can weigh in here a little bit. The policy was set up to address civil service employees. Lots of pushback with respect to appointed employees, elected officials like yourself. So if there was an issue with respect to elected officials, it would be an obstruction, public obstruction. And so I've had lots of inquiries with respect to that line, with respect to appointed officials as well as some elected officials. With respect to our police officers and no previous social media policy, certainly I invited an IED audit that went back 4 years, a retroactive audit that I couldn't get in social media policy, and am always prepared to turn that information over to the FBI.
Okay, thank you. Richard Frank. I don't want to say I'm concerned, but I would think it would be fair, and I know this is outside your jurisdiction, but if we're going to have a policy for civil service employees, I would think all the county employees would have to adhere to that same type of policy. So in your mind, is that something that should come through an ordinance? Is that something, how do we codify it with the county office employees as we do under the civil service rules?
I think one way would, certainly I would defer to the judgment of the city councilor's office, but you can certainly adopt policies that govern these different issues through ordinance. And for instance, I'll cite the whistleblower ordinance. So if someone feels that they are being victimized or retaliated against by bringing forth an allegation or an accusation against an elected official or a person who's appointed by the mayor or appointed by the president of the Board of Aldermen, et cetera, the whistleblower ordinance, which is in effect, is a way for those employees to get that information and have that fully investigated. I will also say that some of the county offices do adopt department personnel, civil service policies, and codes of conduct, and they just simply put their own office on top of, the document so that employees know it pertains to them.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard, any questions?
Alderwoman Howard is.
Oh, wait a minute. You know they have it backwards on my sheet? Alderwoman Howard, any questions?
I do have a few concerns. This report came from an outside agency, and I guess my question is, how did they develop the list of people to look at, or did they just go fishing, and how did this come to be? And they identified people that were members of our department. The Philadelphia, I understand, was another one, and other departments. How did this come about? Was this something we requested, or was this?
This was not a request of the city of St. Louis. I'm not sure how they were able to develop their algorithms and how they were able to get the data. Well, I have some speculations, but I'm not sure. But it was not at the request of the city of St. Louis.
So when they identified these people, did they send you a list of those, or how did we learn who they were?
Well, we learned in the exact same way that you learned.
In the media?
Yes.
Okay. But how did you identify those people after that?
Well, we have cyber crimes, and I get into people's stuff.
Okay. I just was curious because, I mean, it seemed what the report was just numbers.
Yes, so we
and I didn't
went
know.
in and we looked into their social media, so there are ways to do that. This is a very extensive, ongoing investigation that we're going to take a look at a lot of things and a lot of people.
And then I guess this would be a question for Mr. Franks. Of those that were identified, how many of those have been dealt with already?
So far, with just the social media policy, we've had 2 dismissals in the fire division, and we've had 3 lengthy suspensions in the police division. There's current investigation still going on in multiple departments, and also the Director of Public Safety and Corrections Commissioner have dealt with this in corrections in just 1 instant. So it's been relatively infrequent in terms of social media. But again, I think that people were not aware that when you go to those Facebook pages, it's being filtered out based on who you usually talk to, et cetera. And there are ways to override that. And so I know that the process is still undergoing in terms of, who is going to be the recipient of these investigations.
So I guess let me ask the question again. How many people have been dealt with before this was brought to your attention?
Before, there were 4 instances in terms of social media.
Okay.
Social media. And again, because it's an evolving type of legal area, before, again, we are public employees and we have this protected right. And there's been a gray area about whether or not you can discipline somebody if they're a firefighter or if they're a police officer. You can even have those policies in place. The police commissioner could do this. The fire commissioner could say that you're bringing prejudice on the service, but it's never been very clear about what you do on your own time if you're not in uniform and you're not speaking on behalf. But I think the dawning realization is that we, particularly in public safety, you're on board 24 hours a day.
And
similar to being
conduct
an official.
unbecoming.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Okay.
Conduct unbecoming, bringing prejudice to the service, and therefore it's actionable. And so the city is taking a step forward, I think, in terms of aggressively dealing with these types of off-duty behaviors.
Okay. And so all departments are accountable, that are under your
Everyone.
purview?
Everyone.
Okay. I think that's a good thing because
Yes.
I think as ambassadors of the city of St. Louis, everybody should be held accountable for.
Yes, and the policy applies to every single single service employee, so there's no exceptions.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Now that I'm watching on my sheet properly, Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, and thank you as well, Judge Edwards, Chief Hayden, and Director Franks. I'm glad that you all could join us. We just met recently, and we talked about a lot of the issues that are being brought up today. So I guess this meeting was specifically just so the public can share our same concerns, because every member of the Board of Aldermen is outraged, and it's an embarrassment on us as a city, but we're not truly shocked because we know some of these things go on within our police department. I didn't receive a lot of calls from my constituents because it's their norm. They encounter it. But I think, I said this the last time we spoke about this, and I'll say it again, I'm more concerned with how we change the culture within our department, because prior to stuff hitting Facebook, if someone is that bold, knowing what type of job they have, then their partners or their captains or whomever probably have seen them exhibit some of that behavior. So I'm pleased that there will be yearly training regarding these issues, and implicit bias is definitely real within our city and our police department. So it's just my hope that we go above and beyond to let them know that this type of stuff is not tolerated, because we can't move forward as a city when we have officers making racist comments or homophobic comments, and I'm confident that we do have good leadership in place that's definitely concerned about it. Sure.
I'd like to say that ultimately, I review all discipline that comes to the city, and I have noticed that since we've issued the social media policy, there's been a marked decrease in these egregious things that have been brought to our attention. So it's my hope that, again, as the judge said, you don't have to like me. I'm openly gay. You know, I've had my name put on social media postings and union halls, and, you know, it stung, but there wasn't really a lot I could do about it. There is now. You know, there is a way that we can address behaviors if we're different, if we're disabled, what have you. And I see a marked improvement already. One area I think that we could work with the commissioner on is we do extensive profiling of people in terms of assessment before they come into the police department. We have a personality inventory and also a full psychological exam to make sure that they're not inappropriate, that they don't have some types of implicit biases about people. And I think that I would welcome the opportunity to work with Commissioner Hayden and the judge about how we can further refine and focus some of those types of testing before we get these people into the system and have a lot of status. You know, sometimes it's insidious. You might not see it for a while. But I can also tell you already that we have a lot of people who fail out of the police academy because of behaviors. If their behavior is poor, they're gone. A lot of psychological profiles, you know, where we have people who are impulsive or who are angry or hostile. So we will continue to refine our procedures so that hopefully we can make sure that these people do not enter the city system. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and I don't have any other comments.
Can I say?
Yeah, go ahead. It's okay.
And again, I guess what the chair, starting off, he said that it's less than 2%. And I think that bodes well that we do have a competent police department that overall is very concerned and very human in their interactions with people. These are a few, and they're being dealt with, and I think that's reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman. So if here's what we're going to do. We're going to dismiss. I'm going to ask the room to be cleared if we are going to speak out, and that will end any public comment. Snapping, anything. This was meant to bring out the chief and everyone involved so that we understand what's going on. If the people sitting out there want to get out of control, then we're going to empty the room and we'll end the meeting. I've done it before. I have no problem with that. This is about listening. It's about understanding. It's about asking questions that the aldermen that sit on this committee are going to ask from them. We will follow up with future meetings to see what has been enacted. This isn't a one-time meeting. So please, I would ask that everyone keep clapping, snapping, and yelling under control.
Mr. Chair, can I just, let me just make it clear. I appreciate you acknowledging the fact that we're working, doing everything humanly possible. Listen, 2% is too much.
Mm-hmm.
No, and I understand that, and we'll be there to keep checking.
I mean, and so I don't want to suggest or imply that we're proud of that. But we know that is 2%, so 98% of our officers, I believe, are trying to do the right thing or haven't been caught.
But, and I understand, even when we're talking about the murder rate, now we seem to be over, but even slightly less, any murder is unacceptable. We're not justifying things, we're just stating facts. Alderman John Muhammad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for calling this very critical committee hearing to discuss this issue. And thank you, Director Edwards, for your leadership and all that you are doing to reform our police department, you and Commissioner Hayden. I like what you said earlier. We cannot be naive. These series of incidents are alarming, disgusting, and gut-wrenching. especially for a city that is trying to rebrand, revive, and reform its various communities as it relates to crime and law enforcement officers. I just want to know, the question that I have, and I have several, but one is the most important. How many of these officers are currently on administrative leave? How many of these officers have been fired? And will there be more forthcoming firing as a result of these series of investigations that your office is conducting?
We have categories of offensive posts. The three most egregious have been placed on desk duty. Now, these posts, there's a caveat. If you read carefully the report, there's a caveat. So the investigators from Philadelphia, they did not identify whether the post was an original post or how it was initiated. And so many of the people that appear on this document may have been people that just simply said, I like it. And so if they hit I like it, then they become a part of the offensive group. Or if they retweet it, they become a part of the offensive group. Therefore, we have to do a more detailed investigation with respect to what happens. And so, do you fire a person because they say that they like something, or they laughed at a racially insensitive joke, or that the implicit biases that we all have somehow have been expressed in a way? And so, to answer your question, there is an ongoing investigation. You know what? I would like to. If I thought that I can get away with it legally, I would look at every single police officer's social media going back from the very first day that they joined the police department and deal with it. But I know that I'm constrained. And so I don't like what I saw. I have to address what I saw within the boundaries of the law.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And can you, I know you and the mayor, you both issued a statement following the release of these various reports, and St. Louis having one of the worst racist police departments in the country. And the response by you and the mayor was, we're going to implement sensitivity training. Can you just expound on that a little bit more? Exactly what is that? What does that mean? And what is the hopeful outcomes of this particular training?
Well, sensitivity training alone is not going to fix this problem. This problem been in the city of St. Louis for 250 years. Mm-hmm. It's not going to fix the problem. What it will allow us to do is become more culturally competent, be more understanding of our differences, be able to have the discussion with respect to how hurtful some of these things are to those of us that want equality and equity and things of that sort. So, and let me address the first statement. The mayor and I never said that the city of St. Louis was the most racist city.
No. The media, not you, not you, nor the mayor.
Yeah, and
the
let me just, I push back on that. Do we have problems? Yes, we have problems. Do we have implicit biases? We all in this room have implicit biases. But do we control them so that they're not hurtful, so that they do not inflict harm on our community? That's first and foremost. I can't change your heart. But I'm going to try to change your behavior so long as you're a member of the St. Louis City Police Department.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director. Commissioner, if you could expound on this as well. With these series of social media posts, how has this affected the morale of minority and African American officers? We all know that we have good and bad officers, of course. And I would like to think that most of them are good officers truly walking the beat. Hopefully that this is the case. And I'm hopeful in the police department under your leadership and Director Edwards. But how has this affected the morale of African American officers? You've been an African American officer yourself, and also the former commander over one of the most crime-ridden neighborhoods in the city, being over the North Patrol Division. Just how do you think that this has affected their morale, their enthusiasm in their collaboration to work together to solve crime?
Yeah, that's, morale is, as you would know, pretty hard to measure. I certainly am in contact with the leadership of the Ethical Society, and I've talked to some officers. So naturally, hey, some of this, not only were we shocked by a lot of this information, but certainly officers learned that persons that they were riding next to had some opinions and some posts that were very disturbing. So now, you know, you have a situation where perhaps somebody may not want to ride with somebody because they didn't realize of some of the thoughts and ideas that they had inside. That being said, I think that the African American officers are competent, or rather confident, that the investigation is going to proceed properly. Again, I have spoken with the president of the Ethical Society. In fact, the Ethical Society has layered an additional complaint onto this one that to make sure that all of their concerns are covered. And so, I'm very confident about how the investigation will proceed. I realize that it probably has caused some morale issues within the ranks, but at the same time, I think they're confident about how this investigation will proceed and how folks will be held accountable.
Absolutely. You know, this is, like, again, this is very alarming, and these issues did not start under your leadership or Director Edwards. I actually think we made some progress as it relates to changing the community's perception of law enforcement. But when you see these types of incidents, we cannot just think of them as isolated situations or circumstances. This is becoming a continual pattern, not only in the city of St. Louis, but law enforcement agencies throughout the region. And when I seen these posts online, whether it's posts about derogatory comments towards African Americans or a false perception of black people in crime, or derogatory posts towards the Ethical Society, or derogatory posts towards the Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner, and just this negative perception of North St. Louis in general, or youth, disadvantaged youth, or neglected youth that come from North St. Louis. It takes me back to the mindset of August 2014. It takes me back to just a couple of years ago during a Jason Stockley protest. These comments and these posts that's either been liked and shared and retweeted or re-Facebook, it comes from the same energy of when protesters was marching through the streets and we had that chant, whose streets, our streets, and you know, as soon as we said that, or as soon as you heard that chant, you've seen a group of militarized officers chanting the exact same thing, whose streets, our streets, and it makes you think, what is the actual, how is this gap being bridged between law enforcement in the community, particularly communities of color? In the 21st Ward, I want to thank you, I always do. You gave me an excellent captain over the 6th District, and Captain Perry Johnson. Thank you, Commissioner and Director, for that. And he has been doing a fantastic job in rebranding the police department's perception in North St. Louis. Of course, he needs a little bit more additional resources, but when the media paints this portrayal and these particular pictures that we continue to see, it just damages their reputation in the work that he has done and the work that you and Director Edwards have done. And it's just alarming, and we know that media always exaggerates stories. We know this. And whether this particular story is an exaggeration, it's a continuum pattern, and that's the most alarming fact about it. Again, I know this problem did not start under you or Director Edwards, and I do have faith that you and the Director are constructively and appropriately addressing each and every incident accordingly. I would really like to see some real disciplinary actions taken for these officers, or any officer who feels comfortable making these statements. Because when an officer disrespects African-American counterpart, they're not only disrespecting that individual, they're disrespecting your leadership as an African-American commissioner and your leadership as an African-American director. And these are the types of behavior that cannot be accepted or allowed in the department. So I appreciate you, Commissioner, for all you do, and thank you, Director Edwards. No further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd, any comments, questions?
Yeah, I do. I have questions, because I heard Director Frank and Chief Hayden say that in regards to the workplace, and so what's your idea of a workplace in regards to the police officers?
Yes, ma'am. So the workplace in regards to the police officers is really not only their interaction with the public on a daily basis, but again, depending on this particular rule that we're applying in this situation, hey, you're a police officer 24 hours a day, and so your conduct is expected to reflect that. And
that's why I was going to jump on what Director Frank said when you all were talking about the social media, and it's when they were on duty, but it's my understanding any person that's working a job that has the social media policy, that social media is looked at 24 hours. It's not just when you're on duty, it's any time, because those police officers are reflecting us as a city.
That's right.
And so it doesn't make a difference if they're on duty or off duty, it's still unacceptable. And so I guess my question is, back to what Alderwoman Hubbard said, is the culture. And I understand Judge Edwards is saying, you know, I can't change how you think and stuff, but how are we looking to change the culture of the police department? It's not only the races within the city, it's races within the department. So how are we going to change that culture to make people understand that because you're African American, Hispanic, or whoever, you still are a police officer and you should be respected in that way? So how are we looking to change that thinking?
Yes, ma'am. Well, certainly I'm hoping that this investigation and the results thereof are going to send some strong messages about the culture of the agency. I agree with Judge Edwards. I do believe that there's some awareness, that there's some like I said, because the posts range. I mean, some were deeply insensitive, and some were not as insensitive as some of the other ones. And so I believe that messaging through discipline is one way in which culture can change, and certainly that message can be strong. And so that's certainly my contribution to this project, is that I'm going to make sure that discipline is meted out fairly, but at the same time strongly, and meant to discourage future behavior that's similar to this.
And so I guess what I'm asking also, because I praise you two, because you coming into trying to clean up a mindset that has been over 200 years. And so now you're trying to change this whole thinking of these guys or girls or whoever that's thinking, how they're thinking. And so the people in our community are dealing with this. And so it's not only the physical, but it's the mental and verbal abuse that they deal with in the communities, because, and I keep hearing over and over, these officers don't know how to talk to our kids. They don't know how to respond. They think somebody's getting smart with them, and they're not getting smart. So I think you all have a big task on your hand to try to change that mindset, to make them understand if a kid hunches or whatever, they're not being disrespectful. That's that culture that we have, and they have to learn that culture. So I applaud you, because I feel that you're really trying to make a difference. But I guess my other question, has there been an increase in reporting the behaviors that have gone on since the social media? Have they increased that? Have you got a report of increase of abuse?
No, ma'am. I do, like, so insofar as the internal affairs reports, there's not been prior to this project being published, there was not a rise in certain types of complaints as it relates to lack of being courteous to citizens or social media issues.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. So I'm last, and I know you all have to go, so I'm gonna, and I don't want to be repetitive anyway, because I echo a lot of the things that my colleagues have said, but I have read the emails, answered the calls of the concerns of the constituents, not just in my ward, but in the city. So I have some specific things that I have to say, which I know you're running out. I promised them I would say. First and foremost, they want those 2 fired. They want the 2 terminated, and now you're saying 3, so maybe they didn't know it was 3, but they asked that if I ever get the opportunity to tell you that the consensus of what the emails and the feedback that I had gotten was that they want them terminated. And understand, I tried to explain some of the things that we talked about policies and procedures and things like that, but I promised them I would say that, so I want to make sure I say that to you all and that you hear them through me. And I want to also ask, thank you for coming today. I have a question for you in regards to the policies and procedures. Some people feel that you're being kind of soft on elected officials. Do you think that elected officials are protected more up under the policy and procedure that you have now? And it's kind of twofold with that, because when I say protection, speaking to the constituents that spoke out to me, they're concerned about the cases that might already now be in place with some of these officers. So they want to know, what does that look like? Now I can tell them, specifically they're on desk duty, they're not on the streets, and things like that. But what about the cases that are already in play that they're a part of? How do you look at that here when we're talking about policy and procedure? What does that look like for them? Because they're concerned about, they've already shown their biases, they're already shown that they're racist. So
Are you talking about the prosecution of those cases? I think somebody...
The investigation piece of those cases.
Yeah. I think, we'll obviously look at those things in IED. We have a very capable circuit attorney that will, I'm sure, look at the ethics and look at some of the other things, not only at the state level. I think that the law compels and our ethics compel that cases that they handle on the federal level will also be evaluated.
Thank you.
And so the answer to your question precisely, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to, unfortunately, the Department of Personnel simply has no authority over anyone other than a civil service employee. So I don't have the authority, I can refer a complaint, which I've done before, and help a citizen or an employee file a complaint if an elected official does something, or if it's somebody who's politically appointed. For instance, the mayor has a number of people in what we call their exempt positions. They're not civil service. So if that occurs, I would work the mayor's office and say, this behavior's been reported. I'm very concerned about it. You need to take action. If I had the authority, which I don't, I wouldn't handle elected officials the same. I'd be tougher on them.
Okay.
Same thing as myself. I mean, I'm the director of personnel, and so if I have some kind of implicit bias or some outward bias, it's even worse because I impact other people's lives.
Okay.
And there's one other thing I wanted to say, Alderwoman, in terms of changing culture. You have to change also what your command structure looks like. One of the things that I'm really happy about is through federal mediation, we reached a 12-year agreement with fire to increase diversity, hopefully, in the command ranks of the fire department. We hope for the same thing in terms of gender and also in terms of leadership with the police division.
So Rick, can you circle back? Listen, I have a very serious meeting with the Attorney General that I need to take. So may we be excused.
I have another question, but it's not for you, so I can.
Thank you.
Well, it is, but it's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
So one of the things...
Is there anyone else from the police department here? Or the police?
That would be authority, no, I don't think so.
Didn't know if Major Sack might be here, but I see.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Detective Sergeant Hella Taylor is here. I'm sure that she is capable of representing the police department.
Right, so,
I was like, she
So-
can't do that.
It's okay. I'll ask them. Okay.
but that's okay, we're gonna have him back in a couple weeks and see how things are moving along, so we'll be okay.
Do that.
Did you have
Couldn't do that.
questions of Rick Franks at all?
No, that was it.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if you wouldn't mind, And if the sheriff wouldn't mind, I have a question for the sheriff since he's here, because I'm concerned about the operations of our county offices and how they will be dealing with this particular issue. Sheriff, would you mind coming? And as the sheriff comes, I'm reminded of a lot of the issues that existed in the sheriff department, a lot of, racial slurs and monkeys being hung in locker rooms and different things like that. And I know that was an issue when the sheriff ran. And so, Sheriff, as we're talking about this particular issue, have you implemented any policies to deal with social media issues and different racial problems that may exist or have existed in the sheriff department that you can share?
Yes, I have. I think most folks in this room would know that at one point in our city's history, the St. Louis Sheriff Department, the sheriff himself was sued in 2010 for promoting racial discrimination in the workplace. That suit was filed, and two deputies from the St. Louis Sheriff Department filed that suit, and they won. We know that racism exists in St. Louis, and we know that racism exists in St. Louis Sheriff's Department, as well as our St. Louis Police Department. So when I took office, I made it clear, Alderman Boyd, that I would not tolerate any actions of racism at all. So I met with my staff, the entire staff, and I issued the edict that if I personally hear of anything racially discriminatory against anybody in any way, you'll lose your job. Now that's how I deal with the issue. The folks that work for the St. Louis Sheriff Department know that I don't tolerate that, and I'm not going to play around with any racial discrimination of any kind. I've also asked my folks stay off of Facebook. I don't want to see anything related to the St. Louis Sheriff Department on Facebook. If we discover it, then you're going to face disciplinary action. So we have a couple of policies in place that addresses that issue.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sheriff, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you provide your written policy to us? Just send it over. I'd like to have a copy of the written
Yes, sir, we
policy
can.
to the Sheriff's Department.
Yes.
And I also think we'll probably, I have the personnel directors, but I may send something out to all the other heads of the departments asking if there's any policy in place, even with the county offices. Before you go, does anyone else on the committee have questions of the sheriff? Okay, haven't seen none. So what we're going to do then, Sheriff, thank you.
Thank you.
So actually, Alderman Boyd's going to take over as vice chairman. I have to be here at 2:30, be somewhere at 2:30, although I'm going to hang around for a bit. He's going to read the policy on how the rest of the meeting will go, and he will be calling everybody up by names. Everybody's on one side, so. Vice Chair, you want us to change chairs?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank everybody for coming out to participate in this public process. I'm going to read Rule 27 real quickly before we get started and start calling names up to testify. After the presentation of a bill at any public hearing, the proponents and the opponents shall be heard alternatively. All persons who wish to testify at a public hearing shall sign a list which shall be made available by the chairman of the committee at least 1/2 hour before the announcement of the hearing. The initial presentation of any witness shall be no longer than 5 minutes, except with the permission of the committee chairman. But any witness may respond to questions by members of the committee for an additional time period to be determined by the committee chairman. And any witness may submit written testimony to the committee at any time prior to the conclusion of the hearing of a bill. With that being said, we are going to start calling people up. Remember, you have 5 minutes, but you don't have to take all 5 minutes. First person up is Mr. John Chasnoff.
Hello, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you very much for listening to me today. I very much appreciate it. I wanted to start by saying that I have every confidence that the Director of Public Safety and that the Chief of Police are taking this issue very seriously. And I believe that there is authority to discipline the officers who are involved, and I appreciate you all bringing that out today, that the authority is there to discipline these officers. But I wanted to say that I think that their career needs to be at an end. Those officers have rendered themselves ineffectual. First of all, because now their cases are up for question with the Circuit Attorney's Office. As the chief stated, other officers are requesting that they don't be assigned as partners to these officers. They're not able to perform their functions anymore effectively as law enforcement officers, and they need to be removed. I don't think it's any excuse or any a diminishment of their responsibility to say that they liked a post or they retweeted a post that it wasn't their words directly. I think those folks who liked a post of that nature are just as responsible as anybody else. I also think that it's not a matter of what percent of officers have been guilty of this particular behavior or who are caught in this particular instance. We've played that game for many years about how many bad apples there are in the police department, and the old saying is that one bad apple spoils the bunch. I don't think that's true of all police officers. I think there are good police officers, but I think it's also true to say that this police department has tolerated this kind of behavior for decade after decade, and the officers who knew about these folks, who didn't say anything about these folks, who let it go by, are guilty of creating a culture in the police department of racism and discrimination. So I think it goes really well beyond just a question of social media. This is really about racism and the tolerance of racism in the St. Louis Police Department. This is a long-standing problem. 2 decades ago, I started looking at Cop Talk when it was a public forum online that I could actually read. They got wise and they made it non-public after a period of time. But when I was able to read Cop Talk, I used to print out the statements that were being made by police officers. This is 15, 20 years ago. And the comments that the officers were making as police officers on Cop Talk were outrageous, just as outrageous as these statements. And it's been going on for far too long. You can't tell me that their partners didn't know, that the chief didn't know, that other people in the department who are responsible to correct this kind of behavior didn't know, because it's been going on too long. When Chief Mokwa was in office, he told me that any officer that used the N-word would be fired. It was only a matter of months before he was brought to the test on that question, and the officer was not fired. And so all the way up to the level of chief, this kind of behavior has been tolerated. Statements get made that it's not going to be tolerated, but that's just not been the case in the St. Louis Police Department. Bill Whittier, when he was a mediator for the Justice Department, came out with a report about racism in promotions in the department. This was 15 years ago. Nothing came of that report. The Ethical Society of Police just a couple years ago published a long and detailed report about lack of promotions in the department, discriminatory assignments in the department. To the chief's credit, he acted on some of the recommendations in that report, but it went largely unheard, unreported, and not acted upon. So I think that you also have to see this current scandal in relation to the barrage of scandals that have hit this department over the past few years. I mean, it is at least once a month we come up with officers who beat up their own, who make insensitive comments and laugh about protesters, who are arrested for stealing and for other bad behavior, for drugs in the department, for the
30 seconds.
Okay, for the Russian roulette incident that happened. So I think all of these particular comments need to be placed in the context of a police department that is rife with racism, with tolerance of racism, and with bad behavior on the part of its officers. It's time that we have a fundamental shift in the culture of the department, and I really appreciate the alderpersons who brought that issue up to the table today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chashnaw. Next up is, and please forgive me ahead of time if I mispronounce any names, Heather Demian, okay.
Okay. So they said that there's now 20, the newspapers had been counting, there were 22 current officers. I had counted 24 because there were 2 current officers that I had outed 2 years ago. I believe they referred to one of them with the anti-Muslim posts. I actually have dozens of screen caps from that officer's Facebook from 2017. It was way more than just anti-Muslim posts, and I only posted a very few of them on Twitter when I reported it. He also shared, on Facebook you don't retweet, you share. And if you're sharing memes and posts from the 3%ers, violent, extremist, anti-government militia gang on your Facebook, there's a reason you're following that page, and there's a reason you're sharing those posts. And I know at least one officer in the Plainview project did that, as did the officer who shared the anti-Muslim post. The FBI has been warning for years, and it came out of his report in 2006 that white supremacists are infiltrating police departments. You have I'm assuming one of the ones on desk duty is one of the ones who was using a pseudonym on Facebook that is, the title is a KKK official title as part of his pseudonym. I'm concerned about the it concerns me that the people who are hired to investigate crimes don't realize when they try to use fake names on Facebook, their real names are still in the URLs. I mean, one of the officers in the Plainview project, can you hear me? Okay, sorry. One of the officers in the Plainview project, who had previously been disciplined for wearing a Darren Wilson bracelet around protesters, for sending violent threats, threatening to kill protesters on Twitter, and in 2015 also has posts in the Plainview project. And I just checked his Twitter, and he was still posting racial slurs like less than a month ago. So, and he's still on your force. The one thing that the FBI also warned about was, this is more than a social media issue. You have white supremacists who have infiltrated the police department. And one of the things that the FBI warned about was that some of them are very good about not exposing that exterior, and they call it, they're called ghost skins. So this has been an issue for a long time. It's been known for a long time. You have officers who may not be affiliated, may not have said racist things, but they encourage violence against protesters and journalists. There's one that was not in the Plainview project that I outed in 2017 for encouraging violence among officers who had committed violence against journalists and expressing a desire to see them commit more violence against journalists. And he's still on your force. So, this is more than just social media, and it's a cultural problem. I mean, we've repeatedly seen text messages coming out from police officers talking about breaking cameras so that people, they can't be filmed committing violence. And one of the victims of their violence was one of their own undercover officers that they embedded in a protest. The officers who express desire to see me and another journalist be hit with a brick after their fellow officers had already maced us with no warning, no dispersal order, in violation of the Constitution and in violation of
30 seconds.
department policy. And I have that all on video. And I also have Chief Hayden on videotaping that whole incident as well. So there's multiple videos of proof of those officers violating department policy, and then other officers went on Facebook and celebrated that and encouraged more violence. This is you have some serious problems in the culture of the police department.
Thank you, Ms. Demia. Next up is Mr. Bill Monroe. Mr. Monroe, I apologize. You were actually number 2 on the list, and I didn't see you. You were
I know.
in behind the podium.
That's senior abuse, so I'm going to let you go.
I apologize. Please accept my most humble apology. It won't happen again.
That's all right. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'm a former St. Louis police officer. Don't let the long hair fool you. But I came out of the Army in '67, and I became a member of the St. Louis Police Department. And I watched about 6 different police chiefs come and go. And what I'll say to you, and you mentioned the white KKK and these organizations who have embedded themselves within police departments across the United States. And I'm one of the few black police officers that will admit to having about 3 fist fights in police stations, primarily the 8th District at the time, during Easton. And these fist fights were with white police officers who sought to abuse our people and take advantage of them and even try to kill them. And I respect Jimmy Edwards when he posted the need for sensitivity training and what have you. It's way, way past that. As a young narcotic officer with long hair, afro, and street clothes, I was accosted on more than one occasion by my white, blue uniform counterpart with guns on me, not knowing I was a police officer. And my response to these heathens was an instantaneous pulling my own gun, because I would shoot also, and that saved my life. You have racists embedded in this police department, and they ain't going away with sensitivity training. And I heard something with the personnel man, and he spoke about having a process to get rid of or not allow these type of sadistic people on the force. And I questioned that. What the heck happened with a Jason Stockley? How did he get on, given what we witnessed? So that process has to be looked at. And the fact is, these people charged with these, and there's a whole lot of difference between personnel policies for the trash man, personnel policy for the man who cuts your trees for the city. We're dealing with men and women who can kill you because of the bias and the racist mindset that they bring to this community. And I charge black police officers with the responsibility of being first on the line. If I'm in a room with a white police officer who's going to abuse, I'm going to snatch a knot in him, because I'm a different kind of guy. And the fact was that I was never going to be promoted. When you act like that, black policeman, and if your community don't support you, you won't get the promotions, you won't get the considerations. And you got one real big monster in the room, and that's the police union, city and county. And I would advise you, the key to what's going on in our city is not more police, it's not more National Guard, it's not the ATF. One of the key solutions sit on the corner of Natural Bridge and Vanavena. And that's the Beaumont High School. And there are some of you that know that I'm about a signature away for taking Beaumont High School under the name of Harriet Tubman and open up Harriet Tubman High School and Preparatory Center right there. That's the key to what's going on in North St. Louis. Our children are begging for education, skills, and job training. Not more. We don't need the National Guard. And I hope the heck that they're busy fighting floods and sandbagging where they can't come in our community. We don't need them. We need education, skills, and job training in our community. On the desk of the superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools sits a 23-page document signed by Bill Monroe. I'll await his signature. That is part of the key. That's the solution for what ails our community. And these police officers who are charged with these things, fire them. Not only fire them, fix it to where they can never, ever enter law enforcement again, because they don't have the attitude or the mindset. You're not going to take these racist dogs and put them in a classroom and sing Kumbaya with them and expect something to happen good. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. Next up, we have Amir Brandy.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm sorry. As police officers, you expect the integrity to be there. At the end of the day, I work in a law office, so I'm responsible for preparing the attorneys for trial. When you read the reports, it makes you question, why would he say this? Why would the suspect say what he said? So I go back to the integrity of a law enforcement officer, and you say, wow, if he is what is described that brought us to this meeting, how accurate is the information in the report? This is where we start. And this is where we start that determines whether or not this person's life goes one way or the other. The questions and the things said in reference to these officers, we have to take that real serious. I don't care if it's 2%, because cancer starts as a small spot and it eventually develops and consumes the body. This problem with police is a major problem. When they see us, this is what's been going on in St. Louis as far as I can remember, and I'm soon to be 54 years old. The stories that come from 1200 Clark, if you talk to some of the older officers like Bill Monroe, the stories that you get from them, man, this is a deep embedded problem, and we have to look at this, and we can't just look at it and put a Band-Aid on it. This is a problem that should not be tolerated on any level. People's lives are at stake here. These same officers go in our community, and we watch them. I'm one of the reporters for Real STL News, and at the end of the day, we look at the difference in an investigation that goes on south of Delmar that may last half a day. We look at the investigations that go on in our community, that they don't knock the doors, they don't look for the witnesses, and the crimes stay unsolved, the murders stay unsolved. While if you just stand in the audience, you can hear who did it, what they were driving. These officers, they congregate and they, pretend to be doing the job, even ask for raises at some point. And we give them raises. They ask for more officers to do the same thing, and we flirt with giving them more officers, and they're unproductive. At the end of the day, they don't really care about a portion of the community, and that's a problem. That problem goes way further than this Facebook thing, way before Facebook was even thought about. And it's been consistent It's been even complaint about from officers who ride along. I remember an officer telling me about Bill Monroe, and this officer is a chief now in Pagedale, I believe. And he was in the office and he was telling me a story. He say, when I came on the force in 1968, I was a ride along. I was in the 4th District, and he said that he was assigned to a sergeant, and this sergeant happened to be Caucasian, and this sergeant, they were riding down a particular street in the 4th District, and this is where he grew up. And he said that they came upon some kids playing in the street, and he said that the officer yelled out the window, "You N-words, get out the street." And he said it startled him. And he said he's outspoken, but he was instructed never to, as a rookie officer, never to say anything. Yes, sir. And he went on to say, he finally mustered up enough courage to say something, and he said that, he said, if they are the N-word, then what am I? He said, you have good ones and you have bad ones. And at the end of the day, he was eventually transferred to the 6th District, where Bill Monroe was there to protect him. But this officer was shot at as a result of some of the things that he spoke about. But this is the culture of policing in the city of St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr.
And the
Brady.
history continues.
Appreciate your
Yes,
comments.
sir.
Next up is Heather Taylor.
Tall. Sit back. So I would like to say thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Ethical Society of Police. And I'm going to try to use these 4 minutes very quickly here, but I want to state on behalf of our membership that we are angry, we are livid, we don't feel safe with these officers, and neither should our community. Once you've shown me that you're racist, there is nothing more I need to do with you. There is nothing more that you can do for the citizens of this city. Policing, taking away freedom, and being armed with the ability to shoot and kill and give that same narrative that we often give when we kill someone. So these officers are a problem. We don't trust them. We don't expect them to have our back. And I'm going to mention some things. In 2017, myself and Reddit Hudson spoke out about Jason Stockley on behalf of our membership and an overwhelming number of officers, both black and white, that believed that he was guilty. He said he was going to kill Anthony Lamar Smith. He did just that. He outlined it with his words and his actions, and he was found not guilty. That's the same that happens all around the country. During that post, some of our own officers in 2017 stated, one of their family members said that she hoped I bled out on a call. My own coworkers liked the idea of that. My own coworkers called me the B word. I reported them. There are officers that are on this list right now that I've reported before. Thank goodness the city of St. Louis stepped in, because in 2017, under Chief O'Toole, interim Chief O'Toole, and others, I was essentially told that it was a First Amendment. So that I'm supposed to respond on a homicide call with officers that want me to die. And I'm supposed to work with them and feel comfortable. So the city initiated a process. They found, they ruled in my favor that it was discrimination, and those officers were punished. The most they received, I believe, were 3 days. So I'm back out there working with those same people. I see them. Do you think I turned my back to them? These are law enforcement officers, the people who are supposed to set the standard of safety and accountability. I would never turn my back on them because I don't trust them. That's the reality for African American officers and other minorities. And we've complained about it. Let's go back to 2016 when we released the 112-page comprehensive evaluation on our police department. That document has been used in state court, civil court, and it hasn't been refuted. I want someone to name a time when someone said, this isn't the truth. Say it to us. Because guess what? Everything we stated in that document has become a reality. It is exhausting, it is overwhelming. The amount of racism that's within our police department. That's a reality. Right now, if you're Hispanic, if you're Muslim, if you're African American, that 2%, that's what they choose to state. It's much more than that. It's a reality for us because we see it every day. So when we're saying 2%, I don't care, it was 0.2%. It's too many, but that number is much higher than that. What we seem to forget as well is Officers Milton Green, Luther Hall. Luther was beaten. When we talk about that violent culture, those violent posts, there you go. Protesters were beaten. Some were maced while in wheelchairs. When we talk about that violent culture, it's there. Those officers are still on. Let's talk about Milton, shot by one of his own co-workers. There's been no justice for him. He's still struggling with the city, fighting to come. He'll never come back. Still struggling with the city to decide that. So when we talk about racism, let's talk about systemic racism as well. It's been ingrained within the city, within our police department, whether we want to address it or not. We've also have officers who are mostly minority who have been wrongly terminated or placed on forced leave without pay. Ryan Cousins, Kiana Carruthers, Brassfield, Major, and others who have lost their jobs, who were coming to the process of losing their jobs without pay, who have been brought back with back pay. The city of St. Louis doesn't pay back pay unless they found that the city of St. Louis, our police department, was wrong. I had 4 other points to make as well, but I guess I'm not going to make those. But another thing we need to address is our commanders. They're in the highest positions on this police department, but until they're held accountable, you can't expect those that they supervise to believe that they can be accountable as well.
Ms. Taylor, I just want to say we certainly appreciate the hard work and the sacrifice that you give to our city.
Thank you.
And we certainly thank you. And I've been down here for 16 years, and as far as I'm concerned, you're a household name around the Board of Aldermen, at least for the African-American aldermen. And
Thank you.
We know it's hard, but we want you to know that we do hear you, and we do need your support to help make it better.
I agree.
And I know, I speak on behalf of this committee, that we want to make the system better. We want the system to work for everybody. And the most egregious thing for you to say is that another officer wanted you to bleed out or supported you. That is insane. And I will hope that we come up with a policy that is immediate termination, because that is totally unacceptable. And we cannot afford to have our law enforcement officers, black, white, Hispanic, or whatever, walking around with a uniform on every day, concerned about whether or not there's an aid call that goes out and whether they would be serviced.
I agree,
So-
but they'll have my back. So,
Please let us know what we need to do to continue to help.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Susie Chasnoff.
I want to thank Heather Taylor and Bill Monroe for the outstanding job they do in risking their lives daily, both on the streets and with the police. And I want to thank you all for having a public comment session this afternoon. A lot of what I'm going to say, I think, has been said. I'm a member of the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression and have been involved in improving our police culture for the last 20 years. I just want to say Facebook posts are just the most recent tip of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department iceberg. Of course, it's important, and the officers involved need to be fired. Racists can't be sensitivity trained out of their deeply held beliefs. In St. Louis, we've already let slide the hundreds of questionable shootings by police dating back decades, most of which target young black men. We've already watched a chief involved in criminal enterprises forced out. We've watched whistleblowers get drummed out, and the department out of the department while the jump out squad boys get commendations. We've seen the reports about cops shooting other cops, cops killing other cops shooting civilians, cops stealing, cops beating protesters, news people, tourists, black folk, and other cops. And typically with impunity. We've watched as millions get paid out in lawyers' fees and lawsuit settlements. All have been treated as isolated incidents. They are not. They demonstrate a pattern of practices that define the city of St. Louis's police culture. How many years has it been since the Ethical Society of Police published its report on racial equality? What does it take for us as a city to act? At what point do we just man and woman up and acknowledge our reality and say, you know what? We're using a failed model of policing. What can we do to change that? The Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression pushed for and eventually got local control of the police. Nothing changed. CAPCOR pushed for and eventually got a civilian oversight board established. Still, too many abuses persist. We've seen police chiefs make promises, they come and go, and nothing changes. We all know the police will not do an impartial job of investigating this or any of their own wrongdoing. They rarely do, and nothing changes. We have many reasons to suspect that the Force Investigative Unit's reports are shoddy and incomplete. FIU is tasked with investigating officer-involved shootings, so we can pretty much rest assured nothing will change here. The Civilian Oversight Board has been waiting for completed FIU reports in order to do a pattern and practices review. Will something change then? Thanks to the Ferguson uprising, the largest society is finally acknowledging there is a police problem. St. Louis as a whole community is beginning to see the pattern. These are not random, isolated incidents. These aren't bad apples. These are the various aspects of a toxic police culture. We all know crazy is defined as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So why do we hang on so tightly to the illusion that firing a few officers for racist posts will solve the greater problem? We need a whole new iceberg. We need to change the mission of the police department. We have to stop using the failed model of arrest and incarcerate and shift to a community-oriented model of problem-solving policing. This is the time. If we pass up this time to make an honest inventory of where we're at and make the necessary changes, I really hate to see how much worse things can get. And to that end, I have handouts I'd like to share with you all about community policing. Okay, I will give them to you.
You can just hand them. You can hand it to them right here. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Chasnoff. Next up is Philip Weeks.
Okay. Hi, my name is Philip Weeks, and I'd like to thank the Public Safety Committee, the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and I just have a few comments. A lot of comments have been made, and I think I support almost every single comment that's been made up here. So from the article in plain view, it's apparent that the past and present police officers of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department have not received sufficient training to eliminate outright bias and bigotry and expression of their bias publicly. That's apparent because they're doing it. Okay, so this idea that you have to change something, okay, and not only that, but I heard people saying that, oh, it's implicit bias. No, this is explicit bias. Okay, there's nothing implicit about it, so implicit bias training is not going to solve the problem. Now, so the Plainview project only investigated Facebook posts. They didn't investigate other social media. So this is just one platform. So you found, a few bad apples you're saying? No, there's a lot more. You only investigated one little platform. Okay. Plus, I can quote I can open my computer again, but basically I have the 4 names from the officers that abused Officer Hall. None of them made Facebook posts. They weren't featured in Plainview Project. Okay, so you have a lot more people involved in racist behavior, outright racist communication, whether it's through text messages, Facebook posts, and everything. So I think without a doubt we can say that St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department has a problem. Is it unsolvable? I don't know. I know it hasn't been solved. So it's a prolonged problem in the city. So I think the final thing I have to say is that I think it's really important that the police department opens, we demand transparency in the police department. Okay, not only for the benefit of everyone who lives here, but we're not going to be able to solve any of the problems. We've given them raises, we've made police officers wealthier. We don't demand any more transparency or accountability, okay, in the process. So I think that's all I have to say today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks. Next up is Tracy Spees.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'd also like to thank you for being here and holding this hearing and giving people a chance to speak out. My last name is Spees, and I am not related to the lieutenant on the police department who also shares that name, which many people around St. Louis know. My father-in-law was a friend of Mr. Vaccaro, James Spees Sr., and my mother-in-law still lives in your ward. I'm a member of the Anti-Racist Organizing Collective, and I have 2 kids who go to St. Louis Public Schools. I've been a resident of the city for 13 years. Outrage is not strong enough a word to describe how I felt when I read the posts that those officers put out there in public. I get that we have policies and procedures, but why do those policies and procedures continuously favor and protect those who spew these vile, hateful, white supremacist comments? Why is that? Why is it in 2019 we still need a separate police union for officers of color? I mean, I'm just outraged. I'm not a member of the black community, but this is outrageous to white people too, a lot of white people. Okay? These officers need to be fired. You know, that's been stated here already. There is no public confidence in officers who have done what these officers have done. And these are just the ones that we know about. These are the ones who were foolish enough and smug enough to put it out there the way they did. Okay? How is half of our city's population supposed to have any confidence in this police department? How are they supposed to know which police officers are white supremacists and which aren't? As it's been said many times, these are not just a few bad apples, these are the ones that got caught. Okay? And I echo the others who have stated that this behavior has long been tolerated. And I don't think many of us here have any confidence that anything's going to change this time. Why should we believe that? Because nothing has changed in all these years. No one's been held accountable. Not really. Lawrence O'Toole still has a job. He got a promotion after the kettling incident. The answer, I think, is a public health approach to public safety. As John and Susie Chasnoff have mentioned, we have other options. A community approach to violence prevention and policing is possible. Our current model and our current department, just by itself, we're not even talking the millions of in lawsuits that the city's going to have to pay out for these types of incidents. But it's a bottomless money pit on its own, okay? Arrest and incarcerate, more money, more police, more. Where does it end? We need to do something different, okay? Again, I appreciate you listening to our comments here today, but as a resident and a constituent, I need you all to do something about it. Our city needs you all to do something about it. If the police department won't do something about it, you need to do something about it. The mayor needs to do something about it. We can't tolerate this any longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spees. Next up is Chelsea Murta.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Chelsea Mert, and I'm here not only as a civil rights and criminal defense attorney, but I am also here as a child of law enforcement. And I wanted to start off my comment with reading some of the posts that were made by current active duty St. Louis police officers. The first two are from Ronald Hasty, who had 31 posts in the Plainview Project's database. The first one says, if the Confederate flag is racist, then so is Black History Month. The second says, I personally loved seeing this, and I don't care if people were roughed up. When the police tell you to do something, you do it. It's called respecting authority. You pay, bottom line. The second group of postings comes from Officer Thomas Mabry, also active duty, currently on the force, and it is a photograph of the KKK, and it says, if the KKK is a hate group, isn't it about time we start to be honest in America and admit that Black Lives Matter is a hate group as well? I can't say that I'm surprised by some of these social media posts made by 22 current St. Louis PD officers. I think the fact that no one on your committee being surprised by these posts also kind of speaks volumes with regards to the culture in the police department that we have accepted as acceptable. Let's see. I can't really say that I'm surprised by the mayor's lack of action as well, or the recommendation that more training is adequate in order to address this issue. In a post-Ferguson St. Louis, we as residents, we deserve better, and there's no excuse and no more room for social media posts like these. After all of this time, after the protests, the studies, the research, the legislation, we still have an administration that believes that our police problems can be solved with desk jobs and annual sensitivity training. I don't agree that that is an appropriate response at this juncture, and I think, as has already been stated, we are well past that point. The social media posts exposed by the Plainview Project tell us a much different story with St. Louis Police Department. We've had nearly 5 years pass since the Ferguson protests, and with racial bias training already happening, training on how to handle protests, crisis management for officer-related incidents. These posts, those all came after that training. That tells me one of two things. The training that we've already gotten isn't working, and the city's response, it continues to be inadequate to address these issues. Not so convinced that the attitudes have changed in the police department, and even if the number of posts have decreased since the city implemented its 2018 social media policy, whether it's 2% or 20%, it doesn't matter when people are charged to protect and serve all of us, and they're making it known their feelings toward people of color in this city. We need a stronger response from leadership in our city, and mere shifts to desk jobs for officers who have posted inexcusably racist memes and other images to their social media pages. It's inadequate at best. Sensitivity training, it's inadequate at best. An actual response is warranted by this committee and by the Board of Aldermen, since we have a mayor who cannot be relied upon to stand up to the Police Officers Association. Sensitivity training, as we've already heard from multiple other people, doesn't work, hasn't worked, and it's not going to work. The St. Louis Police Department has opened up potential liabilities for arrests made by the officers who've posted those memes, but now that the city is aware of these posts, failure to act may make the city liable. And as a resident and as a taxpayer, I'm kind of sick of my money going to paying these settlements for police misconduct. This afternoon, I urge your committee to take a stand where our mayor will not. These officers should be terminated as they clearly are not able to protect and serve all of us in St. Louis. I further share a concern for our officers of color and our officers who practice the Muslim faith. If these are the viewpoints of those who have been given a badge and a gun, I caution your committee and the board. Lack of action against racist, bigoted police officers exposes the city to further liabilities, lawsuits, and loss of trust that's already been fractured. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murta. Next up is Madeline Bouthold. B-U-T-H-O-D. She left? Okay. Next up is Tony Taylor.
Hello, I would like to say thank you for hosting this hearing. I feel like a hearing like this has been warranted for years. I lost my firstborn child 6 years ago to the hands of 2 police officers. First of all, I do want to say that let's make this perfectly clear. The trust is completely broken between the community and the police department on all levels. That's the truth. There is no disguising it. What they're out here doing to our community nowadays is beyond unimaginable. You just can't imagine. Right after me losing my child in 2013, on June 7th, I was down at the site where he was at. 2 police officers rolled by in a police car, turned their sirens on me, let the window down, laughed, and said, "Hi, Mom." Thank God that there was a newspaper reporter there with us doing a story on my child. She immediately sent that clipping to Chief Sam Dawson at the time. I don't know what consequences those police officers faced, but I felt like it should have been some stiff penalties and they both should have been fired. Not only that, the 2 police officers that gunned down my child was in attendance at Mansard Ball Bay shooting in 2015. So they allowed these police officers to stay on the force. They not only allowed them to stay on the force, they promoted them to be at another police shooting 2 years later. Now, 4 years later, in 2017, one of the officers was at another police shooting, which is Isaiah Hammond. To me, that is a pattern. Somebody needs to look into the police department. From the time that this happened to my child in 2013, I have been asking for an investigation from the Department of Justice, even though I do not believe in nobody investigating their own. No, I don't. But it was worth a try just to see what they would pull out. Bring out some of all this racism, all of this dirt, all of this. Never should we have 2 police unions. Once I found that out, that was sick to my stomach. Do you know what Jeff Ruder did when they murdered my son? He called a news conference and took Chief Dawson on the news. You know why? Because Chief Dawson at that time had enough balls to call in the FBI to investigate my child's case. They didn't do it though. They did a review. But at least he had the balls to call them in because he knew they violated my child's civil rights. Now he's mysteriously gone. Jeff Ruder, you know what he said to Chief Dawson? On the news. What are you going to say to the next mother when she asks for a FBI investigation? Well, first of all, let's make this clear. The family didn't ask Chief Dawson to do that. Chief Dawson took that up on his own actions because he knew something was wrong. Why would Jeff Ruder say something like that? And he's the head president of our union association for the police. What he should have been saying is, how do we prevent this from happening to the next mother? But no, 2 years later, 4 years later, it's more shootings. And I really do wish that John Hayden and Jimmy Evans could have still been in here to hear me, because I wanted to address them. I was at a violent crime prevention seminar, and John Hayden was asked the question, what does community policing look like to him? He could not answer. He could not answer the crowd. How do you think that feels to a grieving mother? That you don't even know what community policing is in your own community, but you are chief of police. Then Jimmy Edwards, a October 8th, 2017, on Columbus Day, held a secret meeting for police brutality families concerned surrounding police issues in Missouri. Why was no city families invited? Mike Brown Jr. family was invited. And excuse me if I'm wrong, but that's not a city case nor a city concern. We need to do better as a community. We need real leaders. Once y'all take this office, y'all got to come up to the plate. You got to take that and do what you're supposed to do so you can be able to sleep at night, because us grieving mothers, we don't sleep. And I just want to say before I end, in 2016, I was at work and I worked in the public. For 27 years, now I didn't get no sensitivity training, and I done dealt with a lot. A police officer put his badge in my face. I'm collecting his information. When I look up, his badge is in my face. So since he had the balls to do that, I had the balls to ask him, do you know who murdered Darren Seals? Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. The next and last speaker is Gina Torres.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. As you know, Tony mentioned, I'm a mother. My son was murdered by the police. It's very hard to see these police officers out here. Like she said, I have 3 other children. Who are my kids supposed to trust? Who are my kids supposed to run to? There's nobody to run to because my kids are scared of the police. What does that look like when children, small children, are scared of the police because they're not doing their jobs? The day that my son was murdered, they were standing across Kings Highway laughing, talking about going and having drinks. They were on Facebook. I'm going to go across on the other side and sit with some beer and party and celebrate. I got the beer, who wants to join? I want to so bad. I can't handle the south side. Sure, it's over Isaiah Hammett. And then she noticed, because people started saying stuff to her, I set my profile to private. If you don't see my post messages, message me. Because she found out that we seen that what she was posting about my son, about celebrating my son's murder. I feel that it's not 2%, it's a whole lot more than 2%, but it doesn't matter if it's 1%. These officers out here need to be fired. And like I said, it's hard. It's hard on me and Tony both. Like, it's hard enough for us to live without our kids, and to have to look at these officers. I was protesting my son's death. I got arrested. They said we only wanted the truck. Rosamano grabbed me out of the truck. You know what he gave me? Unlawfully honking a horn, which my horn didn't honk. It didn't work at the time. These officers out here need to be terminated. I mean, they need to be gone. I know that there are some good officers out here, and these other officers are making it bad for them good ones. Heather Taylor, she's a great officer. She shouldn't have to be scared for her life. I have other messages on post. What about the police association page? And I'm talking about Kim Garner and posted my kid's picture with another, he's like a kid to me, who got shot by police. They need to really be gone and really looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Mr. Chairman, okay. Well, that concludes public testimony for today. I would like to assure everybody that, as the chairman said earlier, this is the beginning. This is a issue that has surfaced that has been both disturbing and embarrassing and humiliating for the city of St. Louis. We share in that. You heard some of the committee members sharing those same sentiments. The chairman said that we will probably come back in a couple weeks or so and try to see where we are from today on implementing some policies and strategies to make the system work better for all citizens. So with that, we're going to call a public safety meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.